recording. Well, this for me is an honor, a privilege, and a joy. Meeting on Zoom with Tom Peters. I've been aware of Tom since 1985, and it's really taken that long to have a bit of time with Tom. We've met once, but Tom, as people who will see this will know, is our best known management and leadership author. I've lost count of the number of books that Tom has written, but I did have a quick bit of research, and Tom has been in this business at least 40 years, 2,500 plus speeches, 67 countries, 5 million people, 7,500 flights, 5 million miles, and so it goes on. So Tom, it's an absolute joy for me that you've given me some time. Do you want to say anything by way of introduction that I may have missed in those figures?
Well, the only thing that occurred when you were saying it was anybody who would be an idiot enough to take 7,500 flights, I would not think is the kind of person you'd want to be exposing the public to. That is truly mad.
I took it from your website. So.
No, I know it's there. No, I mean, there's a story there, and you know the story as well as I do. This is stuff I care deeply about. I have all my appropriate degrees and academic training, but that's not the point. And as I'm sure we'll talk about later, the great irritation, and I'm not sure that, I think it's probably true, I'm not sure of the British or UK education system, but we call, 6-year-old goes to school, it's first grade, called first grade, and second, third, fourth, which is when you're 9 years old. At any rate, my point is, I'm saying put people first, etc. And there is nothing that I say that not only would not require a PhD, but it would require nothing more than a signed certificate by the teacher who taught you in the 4th grade. You know, it's you know, there's a, I don't know whether it's unfortunately made it across the ocean or not, but we say it's not rocket science.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's really...
Hey, you know, speaking of that, I'm sorry, I know this is really serious. You know what we're using in the United States now all the time in the last 10 years? No worries.
No worries.
And that came from the Aussies, I think.
Possibly, yeah. We use it in the UK. No worries.
Yeah, I don't think you've used it forever and ever, as we have not. And I really do think it came across the sea from Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Anyway,
it's interesting you were saying about people. One of the things I was going to talk about is looking back, and I found myself thinking, hang on, Tom was talking about people in 1985 and probably before that. And you're still talking about people. Do you want to say a bit more about that, Tom, in the world that we now
Yeah, I mean, I have said to people, I would love you to buy all 18 of my books and I would happily cash the royalty check. But the real reality is they've all said exactly the same thing. And obviously it's not quite true, but directionally it is true. And even though we're Zooming today, and we can talk about that, but the real story I can take back to a particular morning. And it was doing the In Search of Excellence research, and it was probably 1977 or 78. And I worked for McKinsey and Company in San Francisco, and 30 miles south of us was the town of Palo Alto, now known to everybody on earth, but not then. And in Palo Alto was a modest-sized company by the name of Hewlett Packard. And my co-author, Bob Waterman, and I drove down to Palo Alto and had a meeting with a guy by the name of John Young, who was the president of HP. And Along the way, he introduced us to something called the HP Way, and we use that language today, but it was kind of new at the time. And the centerpiece of the HP Way was something that they called MBWA, which is managing by wandering around. And as I said recently to somebody, that's the book. MBWA is metaphor. MBWA means bosses who get out of the office, who hang out with the folks who do the real work and are in touch with reality. And that was the essence of it. And, you know, two things to add to that. Not planned, because Bob Waterman and I were not a big deal. It wasn't like the Pope was coming. Young is taking us on a tour through some of the engineering spaces, and there's this older guy sitting down chatting with probably a 28-year-old engineer. And Young looks at Bob and I, and he said, I want to take you over and meet this guy. It's Bill Hewlett. And so you literally had the founder, and he is having a chat, just you know, they were, and just, and it really is. Yeah. I mean, you know, we're finished now because that's all you need to know. But you know, that's the story in a nutshell. And the other thing I said is, when my last book came out in 2018, publicity was suddenly podcasts instead of, you know, going into a bookstore. And the 99% of the people I talked to were well prepared, but they all started with the same question. And the question was, Tom, you write a lot about people. What's that all about? Well, now I was in the Navy, and, you know, if we were in that kind of an audience, I could unleash a series of inappropriate words that would, you know, turn your camera red. But fundamentally, I've said, like, what the hell else is there? And, you know, it's funny, and it goes really bone deep for me. I was doing something on Twitter, and somebody said something about, you know, people are our number one asset. And I blew up at the person. I said, that is total bullshit. People are not an asset of the organization. They are the organization. And you know, it's a picky, subtle thing, but to me, it's subtle like a freight train coming at you, you know, at 100 miles an hour. And I just don't get it. I mean, I kind of, you know, I'm writing something now, and simple answers in organizations are questionable, but I really have come to believe, and this does not require that high IQ either, that the essence of this is starting in the hiring process. You know, there's a guy who I quoted in my two things, hiring process, and I'll come to the second one. There was a guy I quoted in my book, and he is the head of a biotech company, which means that you and I can't even understand the names of the job titles. And he said, my secret to having the kind of culture that we want is we only hire nice people. And as we got into the chat later on, he said, look, he said, I need people with degrees that are so exotic that I don't even know what they're about. But he said, let's take that degree. Guess what? There are actually a lot of people who have it. Don't hire the jerks. And in his case, he does this thing which I think is fascinating, not new in many respects. I have an interview with you, and you're the CEO. And I'm the smartest human being who ever walked the earth, and I really know the stuff that the company's interested in. And you just are thinking, oh my God, I want to hire him now. I want to hire him now. This guy is absolutely amazing. Well, it doesn't work that way, because when I walk out of the CEO's office, and this is his term, obviously not new, but when I walk out of the office, I have to run the gauntlet. And the gauntlet means 10 10-minute interviews with the receptionist, with the junior person in accounting, indeed with a scientist in R&D, and every one of those 10 people has veto rights. And I was talking to somebody who knew the organization. They said it's real veto rights. It's not like they're worried about, what's Trevor going to think if I say no to Tom. It's and so on. And I just thought that was fat. And so the hiring thing, two big things. The hiring thing, number one, and number two is the promotion decision to first line management. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and the chief petty officers run the Navy and the sergeants run the Army. And there's enough research to sink a super tanker that says that two things. A, the first line supervisor is responsible for almost all the key variables: quality, productivity, retention, et cetera, et cetera. And B, I can't remember. Oh yeah, and B, your company might be dishonest, which of course it would never be, but I'll stay as an employee if I like my manager.
Yeah, people.
And your company might be solid gold and saving lives by the million, but if I don't like my manager, I'm out of there. So, and the way I've said is, I said, look, nobody takes these promotions to first line supervisor as a lark, but they don't put in 1% of the effort that they ought to, because the portfolio of first line managers, in my opinion, is the number one asset of the entire organization. And I don't give a damn whether it's a hotel or one of those biotech firms. They are the company in most respects. And by the way, I always like to say this when I'm talking to somebody like you. You are indeed today talking to someone with Royal Navy service. So
Yeah, and we're very proud of that as well, Tom. I've heard it said.
No, you're wrong. I'm proud of it. I was in Frankfurt giving a speech, and I hadn't done my homework, and I don't know, it was over 3 o'clock, and I suddenly realized that I was there on the 200th anniversary of Trafalgar Day.
Oh, wow.
And you may think this is insane, which I do, but I literally flew from Frankfurt to London on an unexpected leg of the trip because I wanted to have my foot on the ground in Trafalgar Square before midnight. And I made it with about 45 minutes to spare.
Well, congratulations. That sounds brilliant. One of the things when you were talking, there were so many things that were crossing my mind. One was, I've always loved your diplomacy. Like, sarcasm alert here, Tom. Like this morning on Twitter, your comment sucks. And I was thinking to myself, I wish Tom would be a bit more diplomatic next time. Don't be quite so diplomatic next time.
Yeah. Well, I'd be diplomatic if it required third year calculus.
Yeah.
That was an interesting conversation, by the way.
Absolutely, the guys, and they're amazing. I don't want to embarrass anyone, but it was a fascinating discussion to watch, which I often do. But you said something else there, Tom, an expression that brought memories back when I did come and see you in 2006 in London. You were doing a 6-hour seminar, 4 slots of 1.5 hours, which was incredible in itself. But one of the expressions you used there, when somebody asked, okay, Tom, we hear this from you and we go back to the office tomorrow and we talk to our boss and they don't buy in, what's your advice, Tom? And you thought a while. And then you said you give it a try, but then there comes a time when you realize that life is too short to work with jerks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can remember that, but I mean that
well, no, it's a line I've used before because I believe it, and I understand. The person I'm talking to could have 2 young kids, could have a mom or a dad with Alzheimer's, and I know it's nowhere nearly as easy as that one-liner. But on the other hand, the other thing I've said, Trevor, is unless you were born with a silver spoon, and I don't know about you, but I sure as hell wasn't,
No.
The reality is you're going to work for years and years, and you love your family and God bless you, but statistically speaking, you are going to spend more hours at work by an order of magnitude than you will with your family. And
Yeah.
so, to use that crude language again, if you piss away the work days, you have effectively pissed away your adult life. And it's not, saving the good part for home. Well, that's terrific. I want you to be the greatest parent or child of the older parents as you can be. But statistically, I'm going to spend more of my adult life working in the wherever than doing anything else. And to me, that's really, really huge.
Brilliant. You said also, when we were talking about looking after your frontline folks, and I remember a discussion on your blog many years ago, when I think it was you that said people don't leave a company, they leave a manager.
I don't think I'm the one who said it.
Or words to that
So
effect.
I don't want to take credit for something somebody else said, but I would happily be the person who said it.
Yeah. But people do, they don't necessarily leave a company, do they? They leave the person that is their boss.
Absolutely.
That goes back to your point about people.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we don't understand.
Well, too many MBAs.
Yeah.
And that's meant literally, not sarcastically.
Mm.
And it's not quite fair because I don't have any problem with the piece of paper that says MBA. I have a problem with the content.
Yeah.
And you can blame it on the students as much as the teachers. I mean, I have an MBA, and I had a great friend who was a professor, and he taught the organizational stuff. And he said they all come here, and the only damn thing they want is the finance courses and the marketing courses. And if they have a course that focuses on the human resources, it's, well, I guess I got to do that, but I'm going to spend all my homework time on third order derivatives or whatever the heck the thing is.
Yeah.
And so, listen, I want to go back because it's an important amendment. We had a little conversation about MBWA.
Yeah.
This also is a pathetic admission. Until this year, when everything has changed, my wife and I spent the primary part of our North American winters in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And it is just tragic to think of a 66-year-old guy walking on the most gorgeous beach on earth in New Zealand, still thinking about MBWA. I mean, that's really pathetic. At any rate, I was thinking about MBWA, and I hate words like epiphanies because they should be saved for a real epiphany, but I had an epiphany. And the epiphany was this, and I think you'll A, agree and B, like it. I thought, well, why do you do MBWA? Well, you do it to learn about what's really going on at the front line. You do it to really learn about your employees. And then what went through my head is, that is total bullshit. You do MBWA because it's fun. And if you as boss are not having fun at 1 a.m. in the distribution center with the distribution center team, then my order to you is go back to work, sit down at your desk, type out a letter, resign, sign it, and get the hell out of town. And I really mean it. If it's not soul lifting, I'm willing to take soul lifting other than fun. But if it's not great to be around those, it was funny. There was this incredible football, American football, not real football. I understand that. This incredible coach whose name was Vince Lombardi.
Yep.
And, this could have come out of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or from all four of them. And Lombardi said, as a coach, I do not have to like my players, but I must love them.
Yeah.
And, I just,
Absolutely.
and that's kind of what I mean. It's got to be a real connection. And,
Yeah.
And the other thing I said is that the definition of a manager is a person, and I said this when I wrote it, and I'm choosing my words carefully, who is desperate to have every single employee who works for him or her growing as fast as they can possibly grow. And that's what you do for, no, bosses don't do work. Bosses help other people who do the real work. And so, the whole damn point of bosshood, well, I mean, it makes me also so angry. It's obvious if you're a symphony conductor or a football coach, either your football or our football, a theater director, a fire chief, a police chief, somebody who runs an emergency room in a hospital, it's, they would laugh at you. I said to somebody, we had this football team where I am called the New England Patriots, which is really fabulous. It has this coach by the name of Bill Belichick, who is incredible, also a prick. And I said, so Bill Belichick hires the great Tom Peters to assess his team. And he gives me a month, and finally I come into his office and sit down and I say, Coach Belichick, I've done a really thorough analysis of the team. And my principal conclusion is your players are really very important. And he looks at me and picks up one of his 7 Super Bowl championship trophies and throws it at me as I'm running out the door. But if I sat down with a lot of people in that little conversation we had before and said, it really is all about people.
It is.
And they would look at me a little strangely as opposed to getting a Super Bowl trophy thrown at my head.
Well, you remember,
but it was that, honest to gosh, Trevor, epiphany really isn't too strong. I just was walking on this beautiful beach and thinking, well, why do you do it? No, it's not to learn this and learn. That's the byproduct.
Yeah.
Enjoy
the joy of it.
Joy of being around your team, including, if you made a mistake, including the jerks, just your fellow human beings who you are engaged with.
I think it's a bit more complex than I'm going to suggest, Tom, but I think infectious is contagious, and so is the opposite. Yep. I think it's just being you and being optimistic can motivate. I mean, motivation is usually from.
Well, let's not say optimistic, caring.
Yeah, caring.
Because it's just as important, or more important, 2 weeks after COVID became an issue.
Yeah.
And you should, unless you're an idiot, you're not optimistic. But it really is that somehow we're going to get through this together.
But enthusiasm is infectious.
Yeah.
And the opposite applies. You were saying about, well, I was saying that you've been saying this for years, and I had to laugh a few years ago. My background is healthcare management, and a couple of issues, Tom. One was in one promotion, I decided for the first month not to spend any time in this lovely new office that I had. And the month was spent meeting folks on the front line. So I met people who were working the night shift. They were nurses doing the dirty work, porters, cleaners, cooks, nurses, doctors. And that's the best way to learn is to actually get there with them and listen to them, and then start thinking about what have I learned.
Yeah.
And I wish it was just normal practice.
Yeah, there was some guy who attended a seminar of mine, and he literally was a senior person. He took the door off his office and he hung the door on the ceiling, above the door frame, which I thought was, but your healthcare thing, I remember, and I was just stunned. And I don't know whether you use the same term in the UK. I suspect you do, or something like it. The boss or somebody does rounds, and they go into some patient rooms or this, that, and the other. It was a story about one of our giant hospitals in New York, and a new CEO had come, and somebody said, "Oh my God, he did rounds." as though, this was the
Yeah.
Sermon on the Mount or something,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. The other one was so wonderful. Years and years ago, we were doing a television show, and we went to an automobile parts plant in the Midwest, and it was run by a woman, the first one to have been run by a woman. Her name was Pat Carrigan. And, the one thing I most remember is it was a big plant. And again, I don't know the differences in conventions between the two countries, but in a big plant, the union boss will have his own office. The managing of the union is which makes perfect sense. He's responsible for 1,900 people or something like that. And so one of the first people we interviewed was the union boss. And he was, I don't know, Trevor, 50 or something. Anyway, been around the horn for 25 years. And we were talking about Ms. Carrigan. And he said, let me describe Pat Carrigan to you. He said, she came in or reported to work on a particular morning. And he said, and I was in my office, as I often was. And about an hour later, there was a knock on my office door. And, I went to get it, and there it was, Ms. Carrigan. And she said, could I come in and chat? He said, I have been in this plant for 20 years, and I have never had a factory manager come to my office.
Wow.
I have always been summoned.
Wow.
And it was sort of what you were saying. I mean, those are the things that are like 10 sticks of dynamite.
Yeah. Amazing.
And they're such, of course, they aren't trivial acts, because again, using inappropriate language, the boss wouldn't do it unless he gave a shit.
Yeah.
I've abused the language and invented a word, which I'm writing about, and I call it give a shitism.
Yeah, I've been reading
all these wonderful things that you suggest or I suggest are a total pile of horse dung unless you really get off on people.
Well, I remember, Tom, when I began work at 16 in my local hospital, 16 years of age, and my first boss, who was, to me, was like one step removed from God. And
no, one step above. I don't care how religious you are. One step above God.
And he said to me, I was a young man, and he said, if you want to find out what's going on in this place, go and have a cup of coffee or a tea with the porters when they have their break. Yeah. They'll tell you what's going on. Don't listen to the managers. Listen. Very good advice.
Yeah, it was incredible. But yeah, great. Probably you could put it on that list of greatest management tips. Or
absolutely. And that was back in 1969 when I was young.
Listen, by the way, it reminds me of a book that I've cited. A guy named Matthew Kelly wrote it, and it's called The Dream Manager, and which sounds kind of hokey. And what his fundamental point is, he said, every employee has a dream. And if you want good performance, which is not the way he said it the right way, cause, then effect. But he said, and I'm sure it's almost equivalent or exactly equivalent in the UK, that housekeeper is a single mom with 2 kids who's working 2 jobs. And she would, we have this level of college, which is not university, that's called community college. And it's kind of a stepping stone. He said she would give her left arm to take a single course in a community college, which might start her on a new trajectory. And your job as boss, first and foremost, is to help her with her dreams. And of course, it's to use an inappropriate term again, it's a sucker play. If you help her with her dreams, you will find that the room in the hospital or hotel room is a heck of a lot cleaner than it ever was before. Yeah. But it's a lovely idea, the whole thing of dream manager, help people with their dreams.
I just love that expression. I remember reading a report many years ago, Tom, in the business that I was in healthcare. And it was actually in America, US, it was about the battle to get the right to vote for people with a learning disability. And the title of the report, which I've never been able to source, was Make Us Citizens and Watch Us Grow. Make
Wow.
Us Citizens and Watch Us Grow.
Yeah.
I just wish I could find it, but in these
Yeah.
days, I just can't trace it. But it was all about that dream that people have, and let's put some faith into these people.
Yeah.
And watch them grow, which is what you've always said.
Yeah. Well, and what I've also said is it's also, I mean, it's the wrong way to use the word, but the right way. It's also cynical. It's the best way to make a ton of money. You know,
Yeah.
you're not doing this in hopes of having St. Peter welcome you at the pearly gate. You're doing it because you want to have a healthy bank account.
Yeah.
It works. I mean,
Absolutely.
as somebody, it was interesting, and you know this 20 times better than I do. There's a healthcare group called Plaintree, and they focus on all the right good stuff. But there was one quote in one of their books that said, "Kindness is free." And then they went through this whole list of not only is it free, but how much money it saves. You know, the cantankerous patient sucks up resources like nobody's business. And the kind patient, or the patient who has been treated. And you know, by the way, speaking of that, and it's got to be the same in the UK. Our nurses now, in 9 cases out of 10, are at bedside with a tablet in their hand, and they're entering data in the tablet. And they did a measurement at one of the hospitals near me, which is one of the best hospitals in the country. And nurse to patient eye contact has gone down 70%.
Really?
And as you know, if you want to find hard-nosed, measurable research, the contribution of eye contact, you know, they do these studies, and if the eye contact's right, the average patient's stay goes down by 25%. And it's, you know, it's not just being nice. No, but I mean, that one really hit me between the eyes. And of course, in our case, which is worse than your case, 75% of the 75% of the time that the nurse is looking at the tablet, she's entering financial data. You know, who pays for the suture, who pays for the whatever, and that's our system. And yours is not great, but ours is. We're 10 times worse.
Well, that word kindness, Tom, I've got something that's kindness is power. And the best way to gain power is to let go of power.
Yeah, well, I did this thing because I'm trained as an engineer. I said, I always have to have an equation. And my equation is K equals R equals P. Kindness equals repeat business equals profit.
Fantastic. I'm aware of the fact that we need to wind up, Tom. I've had a message from Shelley that we've lost track of time, and I apologize.
If you got a message from Shelley, then you better obey.
You take notice. I know the feeling. Actually, Tom, it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure. And when you're in the UK, that beer is still on offer. Whatever, a cup of tea.
Boy,
it would be lovely to see you.
It's not a hard sell. My late mother-in-law was British. My wife is an embarrassing Anglophile. And by the way, relative to your profession, she calls me a total hypochondriac. And I mean, I would have thought you had the easiest career in the world, Trevor, because the Brits don't believe in, you know, all that. There was this wonderful thing. There was a guy at the Washington Post who wrote a book on healthcare around the world. And this is when we were getting ready to pass our national legislation, so-called Obamacare.
Yeah.
And he went around the world seeing how things were handled. And he had a back problem, not particularly severe, but a back problem. So he starts in the United States, and the orthopedist says, yep, you got a problem. We'll follow it for a while, but it's pretty clear that it's going to require surgery. And then this guy goes to whatever country and he ends up in the UK. He tells the symptoms to the doctor. Doctor looks at him and says, "You're 45, your back's gonna hurt."
Oh, that's wonderful.
Therein lies I mean, I think it's fabulous. It's, I would say at some level, it's why this little pissant island called, England ran the whole damn world for hundreds of years. If you guys had all been a bunch of hypochondriacs, you would still be, working with the sheep wherever.
Well, I wonder if I could just finish with one thing, Tom, and I hope you won't be embarrassed by this, but it's genuinely meant. And it's something that has stayed with me for 15 years. When you were coming to Birmingham to give a conference speech, you became ill and couldn't make it, as it happens. So I did meet you the following year, but at that time you very kindly gave me 2 tickets to come along to your presentation, which was a full day. It was a 3-day event in Birmingham. And it's something that I think, to me, has summed you up. And one of the reasons that I've just maintained this following of you, this humility, and all the stuff that you give away free. And the thing that comes across is this wonderful humility, Tom. So that's genuinely meant. And I'm just so grateful for all I've felt that I've had a mentor over the Atlantic Ocean for 35 years.
Well,
and,
you're very, very kind.
It's just so good of you to give your time.
Well, I said when we were getting organized, I grabbed a piece of paper, and it's a good thing to end with. When COVID came along, Shelley, my great colleague, and I said, "You just can't sit here on your buns." And so we said, "Let's see if anybody wants," which was arrogant on my part. I said, "I'd like to try to talk about leadership during the times of COVID." And there were a whole bunch of people who were interested. At any rate, I came up with what I called my 7 commandments of COVID leadership. And they are: be kind, be caring, be patient, be forgiving, be present, be positive, walk in the other person's shoes. And the other thing I've said, and I say it in my podcasts and I'm rude when I say it, I look people in the eye and I said, "Look, here's the reality. Your entire professional career and the quality thereof is going to be judged by the way that you have behaved during this COVID crisis. It's a once every 100 years event. There ain't going to be 2, and this is the ball game. You may have a 45-year working career, but what you did during that, let's call it 18 months, I don't know when it's going to end, this 18 months, that defines you and your value, the value of your professional career." And I really believe that. But I've never been happy with anything I've written, but I'm pretty happy with this one. Be kind, be caring, be patient, be forgiving, be present, be positive, walk in the other person's shoes. And
that is just fantastic advice, Tom. And I just want to finish with a quote from one of my other heroes in life as a politician from the UK, Tony Benn. Sadly, no longer with us, but he was a member of Parliament for 50 years in the House of Commons. And I often think about you and what you've been saying all the time that I've certainly known you, and I'm sure before that. Tony Benn, who was a bit of a radical, and he said, "First they ignore you, then they say you're mad, then they say you're dangerous, then there's a pause, and then you can't find anyone who disagrees with you."
I love that. That's fabulous.
And I love my memory goes back to somebody that I knew in the health service when all those years ago. And I said, "I'm becoming a bit interested in this guy, Tom Peters." And he said, "Oh, is he that loud American?"
Yeah, well.
But I said, "Yes." I said, "But people listen."
Well, when I spent my summer in the Royal Navy, it was 1965. And finally, after 20 years, the British had enough money in the coffers to send a fleet around. Well, listen, I know the deal because as I said, I have a mother-in-law who's English. And when they traveled to the UK after the war, for 10 bloody years, they brought food. You know, it's just striking. What was I going to say? It was the most incredibly important thing known to humankind. But there it goes. Talking to an old forever, no short-term memory.
I remember your story about when you were on the ship and you got your first assessment from your British officer who said, "You've done well, you've got 7 out of 10. And you thought that was dreadful.
Yeah.
But in Britain, 7 out of 10 is really good.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I said, yeah, if you're in the US and you don't get 12 out of 10 on every factor, you're in trouble. I must say, one of my great treats was that there a bunch of American midshipmen, about 10, came over to the Royal Navy, and 10 of your guys came over to our Navy. And I don't know how I got selected, but I was one of the 10. But you know, I was born during World War II, and B, I was a history fanatic. And my bunk mate was a guy by the name of Michael Gretton, Gretton, and his father was Sir Peter Gretton. Oh. And Sir Peter Gretton became Sir Peter Gretton because, as the commanding officer of a destroyer, he sunk more U-boats in that horrible North Atlantic where all the merchant ships were being shot down. He was the Brits' #1 U-boat killer. And when I heard that, I said to Michael, I said, you know, can I touch the hems? And you know, to me, because of the Navy background, and because I mean, I know the details of that. You know, the bravest people in the world were not the military. They were the sailors on the merchant marine ships who, you know, went at 4 knots an hour through incredibly shitty water, which was loaded with German U-boats.
Yeah. Oh, that's great connection with Brit.
Yeah.
I would love to see you when you come over next time. Hopefully we can.
Yeah, it'll be lovely. We're not going to New Zealand this year because they don't want us, which I'm in favor of. And God knows when we'll be able to go anywhere. Maybe given what we think is the outcome of the election a few days ago, maybe Americans will be a little bit more welcome than they are at the time. Though
Americans have always been welcome, Tom.
Well, I know that, but I mean, we've gone out of our way to abuse everybody in our relationships over the last 4 years. The two blondes, Boris,
absolutely,
and Donnie, two worst haired dudes on the planet Earth.
If I want to get a bit of America, I travel 20 miles from our house to Stratford-on-Avon on a Sunday afternoon. There are more US citizens there than Brits.
Oh my God, that's
Shakespeare's
amazing.
birthplace. It's just lovely.
Yeah. I was in Changing World. I was doing something in Philadelphia 3 or 4 years ago, and it was about a week before our Independence Day, 4th of July. And right at Philly is where all the big stuff happened, signing the Declaration of Independence and so on. And so there were crowds, and honest to God, 80% of the tourists were Chinese.
Right.
And I was really, really blown away.
Fantastic.
The new world.
Yeah, it's very small as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
The world has become small.
Well, listen, thank you so much. I appreciate I appreciate your very kind words over the years, mostly undeserved, but I'll take it anyway.
Not at all. It's a great pleasure. Privilege is mine. And thank you so much, Tom.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks again.
Love to your family.
Thank you.